Welcome to What Are You Noticing with Kish and Mitra. My co-host is Kish. She is a coach, relatefulness facilitator, and improv teacher.
My co-host is Mitra. He is a Dharma teacher, relatefulness facilitator, and coach. In this podcast, we're going to be covering a wide range of topics such as
relationships,
insights from coaching and facilitation,
spirituality,
living a good life,
Asian American life,
and what's happening for us on our spiritual journeys. Without any further ado, we hope you enjoy the episode.
Hey Kish.
Hey Mitra.
So this week we were talking about feeling our feelings and the journey and arc of learning how to do that, and when is it how do we do that, and when is it appropriate to what level, so we're not being too stoic but also not being a complete muddy pile of emotions all the time.
Yeah. And part of our context is being at the monastery, and one of the main teachings I would say is face your problems and feel your feelings. It's not so easy to know exactly what that means.
Yeah. As I remember, the Zendo had a sign that the teacher made a poem for, which was, "This house is built to trap you in feelings." And so there was often a lot of emotional activation, and the teacher was really good, and just that lifestyle was really good at poking people and at raising activation of where we might be stuck. And yet at the same time, there's this opposite thing where we had a really rigid schedule, and so it often felt like, at least for me, that there wasn't time to always attune and feel things, and often it was just I just gotta clean the floor, or I gotta do this, and don't take feel my feelings, but don't take them as gospel or God or something. It still be functional. And I think going out of the monastery for me in the past year, I've really been trying to let myself really feel whatever I'm feeling and not sort of transcend and detach from my feelings. But I think only in the last few weeks I realized that I maybe took it too far, and I'm learning when to not believe my feelings and just dive fully head into it and kind of let myself just shake out of it and context switch into I don't have to believe every feeling and feed it.
Which sounds different from transcend and detach.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend yesterday about this, where there's how can you tell the difference, and we were talking about how sometimes there's repressing the feeling, and there's actually a tightness or contraction that I can feel, and yet I'm forcing myself to do something else even though I'm feeling something that I'm not acknowledging. And then there's another way in which I can open up my vision or my being and include more of the moment and reality, and not just fixate on what I'm feeling, and that kind of opens the contraction and actually feels relaxing into some bigger safety or wholeness rather than getting enmeshed into the emotion.
Yeah, it gives me a sense of this difference between zooming out so that you don't feel the emotion anymore, or so that you're more identified with something else other than the emotion, and then zooming out so that you're just including the emotion as well as everything else.
Yeah, and I think, as you brilliantly put earlier, not identifying with the emotion as this is all that I am, or this is all that is. Yeah, I even had a version happen today where someone said one of my housemates said something, and I think they were kind of triggered or activated, and then I got activated, and then it'd be really easy for me to feel bad for a while until I clear it with them. But instead I was just I don't need to believe this feeling means I'm unsafe or that there's something wrong, and just sort of I'm just gonna we said we'll talk about it later, and I don't need to carry this around for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that really shows up for me with worry or anxiety where like I'll have those feelings and they'll make me want to, like, I told you I went to this audition on Saturday. I did this Asian improv comedy audition and it went really well.
Nice.
Yeah, and the nights prior, I haven't done an audition in like probably over a year. And the nights prior, I was just like so anxious I couldn't fall asleep, and it's so silly to see like what my mind is doing in the context of an improv audition where you're literally like making things up on the spot, and my mind was just coming up with different scenarios and trying to plan, okay, how would I react in this scenario? How would I react in this scenario? And it's obviously, none of it came in handy. And it just like, it reminds me of what you were saying of the feeling is telling me one thing, but it's not even helping me.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, and it's so funny because I think it's so easy to get lost at that level of like, it goes to like problem solving or analysis or like blaming someone else or blaming myself or like psychoanalyzing my entire history or something. And like, those are all actually not feeling my feelings, and they're also not being present and letting go into like what's actually happening. But it's so challenging. It's like so tempting to get stuck there, and I mean, I know for myself, and also working with other people, I could spend like hours or days or months just in that kind of weird in between place. It's like worrying, anxiety, anger in this like blamey way that doesn't actually resolve anything. So, yeah, it resonates a lot.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What does, how do you know when you're feeling your feelings?
Well, the funniest thing is for me is I feel like I actually often can do this better alone. It's both easier and harder doing it with other people. It's like easier when other people are like supporting me and I feel their support, and it feels like safer to approach hard, difficult feelings that might be too hard to do alone. But I also get self-conscious often initially working with other people where I'm like, I don't quite know what I'm feeling and I don't know what's going to happen. And, there's this like, is it okay to get attention and support? And I think often the feelings are actually more somatic and energetic. And there's a quality of like, my initial impulse is my mind to describe the feelings in words or stories. But in reality, it's usually often much more rich of like, oh, I'm feeling tense here, and there's this memory that comes up or image that comes up of someone like hitting me or like a big axe is hanging over my head or something. And so there's like mental imagery and like sensations and somatic experience and like my awareness doing different things. And it's like it could be a process for me to like get comfortable enough to really feel it on like a fully somatic level that I imagine like a baby or like an animal feels feelings, and that's how they feel it. They don't feel it as like I am angry. It's like, oh, there's this intensity in my body that feels this way, and then there's these other intensities that are like fighting it or trying to control it or something. And so it's actually been a huge practice for me to actually let myself fully feel the activation or the charge, and almost like letting it, not identifying with it, but letting it be like big and holding it with presence with like, but it often can feel like really big. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It sounds like it has a lot to do with experiencing your somatic experience and like seeing if anything else comes up, but not needing to put explanation or stories to it.
Totally. And oftentimes I think like physical attention is a way, either physical attention or like mental analysis or like storytelling is often a way to like titrate or dampen the full intensity of the somatic experience. And so if I'm working with clients, I can like not often ask them like how they're feeling, and they'll be like, there's tension in the jaw or in the chest or something. For me, it's like my left hip is often tense when I'm like holding something. And then actually relaxing that allows for a lot of energy and a lot of weird stuff that's unfamiliar to start being felt in the body. And there's so many protector parts, or so many reactive parts that try to not go there. And so, yeah, working with someone, or having enough like meditative presence to know it's okay to feel that activation, and it's safe to feel that huge. Is that the same for you? Like, how do you
Hmm.
feel emotions? I'm curious. Oh, I'm like wondering now, is that a universal, or maybe that's like a type of person?
I think what you described is pretty similar to my experience, except many times nowadays when I feel the feelings, I don't experience. I mean, maybe if I were looking, I could find something, but I think usually it's not associated with, it's like mostly just like physical, somatic,
Mm-hmm.
energetic,
Mm-hmm.
and not associated with like images or memories.
The imaging thing and the memories is usually when I hit like a core wound or something, and I'm doing a more
Mm,
deliberate, usually like half an hour or an hour, like meditation or coaching session with someone, and then it
mm-hmm.
starts going to like weird associations and interesting connections in that way. Day to day,
Mm-hmm.
hour to hour, it's usually not happening. But I'm also with this question of, I know we both like I facilitated something last weekend, this wellness day in New York, and I know you did
Oh,
the
I didn't know
immersion in
you did
Austin.
that.
Yeah, there's a friend that invited me to his spiritual community called the Folk Art Guild. It's like a Gurdjieff based spiritual community. It's been around for like over 30 years. And he brought some of his clients and friends, and we did like embodiment and circling. And then I know you did the Relateful Austin immersion this past weekend. And so there's this other question coming to my mind of like, there's like in certain roles, I feel like there's like a different appropriate way of being with emotions. And well, case in point, when I was the teacher at Maple and I was doing like interviews, one-on-ones with students, it was like, this is not the time for me to be bringing up my shit of I don't like so and so, and my mom called me about this and that. It was like, okay, I'm dropping into presence, and I'm just there for the student and reflecting them back as best as I can. And like my job is to get out of quote unquote my like normal day self, and be more of a mirror, more of a present awareness or something. And then like if I do certain like traditional work environments, there's like a certain level of vulnerability. But again, I'm not gonna like bring up and be like expect on a group call, like team meeting, like
Yeah.
I'm gonna spend 20 minutes talking about something, some interaction I had with my ex or something.
Yeah.
But I might say like, hey guys, just so you know, I'm like, I just had a hard call earlier today, and so I might not be fully here, but I just want you guys to know that. So it doesn't mean anything about you guys. I'm just not 100% today, and like that's appropriate. And then there's like facilitating,
Yeah.
which is like a whole another thing where you're kind of demonstrating or role modeling the way of relating to experience, and it's like to me like extra rewarding and also extra challenging. Like how do I also like more easy in a lot of ways, but also harder.
Yeah.
You know?
I relate to that.
Hmm.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this recently, partially just because of doing it and
Hmm.
like facilitating versus coaching versus, just being myself. And I
Hmm.
think something that's nice but also challenging is that I feel like in those roles you do have to be yourself, but
Hmm.
then you kind of choose which aspects of yourself to lean into, maybe.
Hmm.
And I started reading this book, my friends recommended it, called Unbound,
Hmm.
A Woman's Guide to Power.
I should
Have you
write
heard
this
of
down.
it?
No. I want to
It's
be a powerful
so
woman.
interesting. I think, I mean, men can benefit too,
Sure.
definitely. And one of the distinctions the author makes in the book is attention in versus attention out. And the author's perspective is informed by, like, I think 20-ish years working as a professional dominatrix.
Whoa.
And also training to be a Taoist nun.
That's a crazy combo. Okay.
Yeah, and
nice.
So she lays out like what attention in and attention out are, how both of them are powerful. Attention out is more of a dominant way of being. Attention is more submissive. And I think the thing that I'm trying to map, and I don't know if, I imagine you could probably like relate to what I'm gonna say, is when you're a coach, I feel like it's so important to have just like attention out, like coach and teacher. You're like just holding that person, and I think from that perspective it makes a lot of sense why you wouldn't be sharing like, hey, I'm having a really tough day, or like when you bring that up it really like triggers me. And there's a way to say those things while still keeping your attention out, and there's a way to say them where you're like going back in. And I think when that happens, the client or student or whatever, like their attention's gonna leave themselves and they'll start to worry about you. Whereas I think being a facilitator, you can have more of a movement between attention in and attention out.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's making me think about the expectation or the agreement of like the facilitator or the coach or the teacher or the friend or just person with whoever the audience is. And like different contexts have different either implicit or explicit agreements, or like what's effective for the outcome that the meeting is for. And it's also making me remember I was on this, I drove for like 14 hours, or no, not 14, it was like 12 hours a few days ago. And so I was listening to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts, and there was one with Conan and John Mayer. And I don't know why, I always find psychological insights from comedians and musicians talking, but John Mayer was talking about something he advises other musicians to not do when they're on stage is to not apologize and be like, sorry, my voice isn't 100% today, or I don't know if this is the best show I've ever given or something. He's like, don't say that. Like, you're giving the best show that you can give right then, and anytime you say that, you're just sort of like transmitting that discomfort into the audience, and they don't need that. And it reminds me of like Mike Bloss would say, a lot of facilitators would start a circle or start a session with like, I'm noticing I feel really nervous and I don't know what to do about it, or I hope I do a good session. And he's like, that's a good starting step, but don't stop there. Like, learn to work through that and like choose, like what you said, you can choose what to focus on or choose action or something. And so there's this way of, even if you have a lot of emotions, there's like a yes and of, there's also choice and freedom to what's appropriate and what's beneficial and what's going to lead to the outcome that you want.
Yeah. And after a while, it just gets so boring.
Right.
Always being like, I'm feeling nervous. I don't know what to do. I feel self-doubt.
Totally. Yeah. And that becomes like the context of the group automatically until someone else maybe breaks it. Like, oh, now we're in the space of discomfort and anxiety.
Yeah. I can totally see what you're mentioning with musicians and performers, and I think the way that I'm connecting that to the attention and attention out is when people are sitting in an audience or, you know, attending some sort of event or performance or whatever, they're ready to receive. I think they want to be in that like attention in, feel feel like held and like, how is this moving me, and like, what's my experience of this? And if an artist, or you can even extrapolate this to like parents and children, if they're unsure of themselves, then it's pretty natural for your attention to go out. And I think that's just so much less enjoyable.
When I'm coaching or teaching, there is still an awareness inside, except I'm automatically harmonizing or saying yes or making okay whatever the experience is that's happening, and I feel like I'm sure everyone's had this experience where like if I'm talking to a friend or a coach or a therapist or a teacher or something, and I can tell that they're not comfortable, they're not okay somehow, it's going to make it harder for me to be more vulnerable or drop in. And oftentimes, like, I mean, this is the classic like coach therapist learning arc where or the facilitator, where they try to do too much because they feel uncomfortable that they're supposed to always be doing something, like what's the next move I should be doing, rather than just sitting in presence and letting things be okay. I mean, the thing I'm really getting to is like when I'm coaching or teaching, it's like, am I holding loving, present awareness? And if something does get activated, can I like harmonize it so it doesn't like in some shadowy way like end up infecting the relationship or the interaction?
Yeah, I think that's still included in attention out. Like the author uses the imagery of yin yang, like there's still attention in while there's attention out. And I think the way that I'm like reconciling that is I'm like looking in to shed more light on the other person's experience as well, like through my empathy. And sometimes if you get triggered, it can be really useful information.
Totally.
Yeah.
This touches, I'm not sure if this completely relates, but this is touching a different area in my life that I recently, I mean, I've known this for a while, but it's become more highlighted recently. And it shows up, it was showing up the most because I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so when I train with the other guys, everyone else, all my practice partners are like kind of like, like they know I'm new, so they're like kind of gentle with me. And so I end up being gentle with them. But then the instructor always comes over and he's like, you can really put your knee right into his chest, like just like give it, like really put your weight on there. And I think there's this, I don't know if it's like Asian American or like philosopher or monk thing, or I don't know where I got it from, but there's like this thing of like, I don't want to hurt people, and this like fully going out and like trusting other people to be able to hold themselves or something is like a learning edge for me. I think that I'm learning of like how fully out can I go, like how much can I let my power just be expressed in a hopefully attuned, safe way. And yeah, there's a way in which I haven't done that in the past because I'm scared of negative consequences and then feeling really bad, like I might hurt someone or they might get really angry at me or whatever it might be.
When you're always just stopping too soon.
Yeah, I mean, like I think like in intimate relationships and friendships, like it's almost impossible not to go full out. It just comes out naturally. Or when I'm occupying certain roles, like when I was the teacher or the director at Maple, somehow being in the role gave me a sense of responsibility to more fully hold that role and not let things slide. But when it's like my own personal life and it's just me, it's somehow more challenging. It's like, it comes up in like if I want to like market myself into like coaching or something, or in dating, how forward to be and don't want to be a creep or something, or as it's like a perfect mirror in jiu-jitsu, it's like how tightly and fast can I squeeze my legs around someone's neck and for it to be safe, that I'm not hurting them.
Yeah. One of the big, one of the big things that I've learned from Meisner about this is, so Meisner, just briefly, it's a repetition practice in pairs, and one person's saying a statement about the other person, and I might say, "You're paying attention," and then you would say, "I'm paying attention," and then I would say, "You're paying attention," and you're just, yeah, it's like a really good, the reason why the book has come up in that circle is because it's a really good practice of training attention out and attention in. And you know, sometimes, and then you can take turns, so like I might say, "You're paying attention," and then you might say something about me.
You're explaining this book.
Yeah, I'm explaining this book. And then we keep doing that, and then you can make demands and stuff. But I think the important thing that I learned from that is you don't have to always get it right. Like I might say, "You're pissed off." And then I would see how you react to that. And then I could say something like, "That didn't land," or "You feel missed." And I think that, I feel like that's almost even more important than always getting it right. It's the ability to see when you don't quite have it yet.
Yeah, this reminds me of like a previous conversation we had talking about like the expectation, I think, at least for me growing up, was like always get an A plus, and it's like making mistakes isn't seen as part of learning and an essential and good part of learning, but seen as, I don't know, be perfect, basically. I was thinking about choir, and I was like, I still don't know how to do almost any of this, but I think I'm learning. I could probably just like do this like 2 or 3 times, and I think like within a few months I would get really good. Even though right now it's just like I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, and it's not such a big deal if you mess up. I think with certain things though, like I imagine if I were to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or even when I'm facilitating or coaching sometimes, there is such a resistance to going too far, doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like the live wire edge of like, there's a lot of energy here, and there's a lot of vulnerability and risk, and there's often like a lot of gold there, but there's also like a lot of potential for impact. So.
And also I think that I have to take a look at what am I seeing as a mistake? If I make someone uncomfortable, does that mean I made a mistake? Maybe not.
I was just thinking like a little bit before this call, we have a common friend, SJ, and I was thinking how polarizing she is, where people really like her or really kind of don't like her, and she's a lovely person, but she is kind of polarizing, and it feels like the more you're willing to be on that live wire, the more polarizing, and hopefully polarizing in a good way, where you attract the people that are good to be around, and you detract the people you don't want around.
One thing that I think is really good about doing relatefulness often and being a facilitator is you can't avoid people that you're gonna have difficulty with. I feel like if you're polarizing people in your everyday life, and just being with people who are more easy for you to be with, I think that's a really good thing. And I also think that it's good to be triggered, face that stuff sometimes.
Yeah, it's like going to the gym or something, where it's like I wouldn't want to. It's not like I should be lifting weights 24/7, but it's good to do it a few times a week. Yeah.
I want to return to what we were talking about at the beginning. I feel like we didn't fully go into all those points.
Yeah, something about the feeling your feelings part.
Yeah, and like when to, skillfully acknowledge them and set them aside, and when to feel them fully, not repress them.
Yeah, I remember once there's the guy that made Bioemotive, Doug Tatterin, and I remember us with him at a workshop, and he was talking about he has this method where he asks the people to say these like core emotions. I am alone, or I am helpless, or I am lost, and it usually can if they find the right one that matches and is attuned to their experience, it usually often leads to like an emotional crying and like a lot of expression. And so I remember so clearly, it was really interesting where he said, so there's one method where you do this, you like find the right word and you release. And he said there's another thing you can do, which is you can change how you're interpreting the meaning of the situation. And often the emotion and feelings will naturally shift too. And so it's a similar thing to me of like if I'm having an interaction with someone and they said something that I get triggered by, I could find a word that's like, oh, I feel
Murderous.
murderous, I feel angry, I feel like they're blaming me, I feel like trapped or something. And that's one way to do it. And that's a good way, and I think it's like really good for like trauma healing. But there's also this other way where I can just be like, I think they're upset. I don't think it's about me. I don't need to carry this. Everything is actually fine. I'm safe. And if I actually believe that, the feeling just kind of like evaporates, and I go back into flow and presence. And so, to me, there's like this at least two different possibilities of like really feeling what the triggered, activated part is feeling, or just dropping into like presence of like letting go of the part and just being like, actually, am I actually in danger? Is there actually a problem? Can I let this go? And if I can, then I don't need to like dwell on it.
I feel like that one's tricky though, because I think it's so subtle to see, are you doing that from a letting go place or a spiritual bypassing place?
That's true. I think both methods have the failure cases. The spiritual bypassing and like subtly repressing what I'm actually feeling, not listening to actually making my parts into exiles is like the failure case of the quote unquote dropping into presence. And then the feeling my feelings has the failure case of like actually over identifying with my child hurt part or something, and like reifying that into that's what actually happened.
Mm-hmm. One thing that this reminds me of is Harris and I got into a fight a couple weekends ago, and one thing that I've really been learning in my relationship with him is, there's like this relationship that I think we both have. I think a lot of people have it, and probably a lot of Asian Americans, a lot of women not really feeling your anger. A lot of men have this too, actually, like not being able to like fully feel your anger. And I think that's kind of like another piece of it that I'm thinking about. There's there's like the quote unquote individual experience of, am I letting myself feel this feeling? Am I like repressing it? How am I expressing myself? Whatever. And then there's the interpersonal aspect, which I think is something that's challenging when people transition from solitary practices like meditation to relational practices like relatefulness, circling.
Totally.
And I think part of like another piece of the picture is what happens in relationship when you do express that feeling. It's like completing the cycle in a it could like result in completing the cycle in a positive way of like, it's kind of like what I was saying previously. When you feel missed, happens next? Or when I feel really upset, what happens next? And I think that's another kind of learning.
Yeah, it's kind of the similar principle I'm hearing of like, instead of trying to do things right, especially not optimizing for avoiding conflict, but instead it's like optimizing for staying in connection in the appropriate way.
Yeah. And I think, I would bet that you can relate to this, like taking a more attention out perspective into our relationships, when actually I think what's needed for a healthy relationship is being able to dance between attention in and attention out really smoothly.
Totally. Yeah. I was just thinking there's like parts language or IFS, so like I have parts, and one part feels this, another part feels that. But then there's like almost like relational parts where I think like what you're saying is like a less rich relationship is when two people are just playing parts and they're like they only let themselves play certain parts, and it's like unsafe to go outside of that. And I think when I think about my parents, I think that was a lot of what was happening, and there was like a lot of fighting and danger when they went outside their normal roles or try to engage in real talk or something. And so it's like a very narrowly defined relationship. This is the safe lane, and if we go outside of that, it's too much. And so, can I find a partner or find a way of being with people that allows for the richness and not have to just be a certain part or play a certain role?
Yeah, where you can actually discover more of who you are.
Totally. Yeah, that's really precious. Yeah. It's also, God, it's like going on a lot of first dates and just hating that. What do you do, and who, like trying to like get to know someone, and like very easily falling into like this part thing. I think I've gotten better with each subsequent date of like not following that script and trying to be like, how do I have like a genuine connection with this person and actually get to know them that's not based on being in more like parts or something.
So you were doing that, or they were doing it to you?
I think we're both probably doing it to different degrees. It's like a interdependent phenomenon. They say like it takes two people to tango, or like a pattern requires two poles, and so if one person changes the pole, then the pattern doesn't work anymore.
It's been so long since I've gone on first dates.
I know.
That it's hard for me to. I mean, even last year when Harris and I started dating, I just went on a date with him and a date with this other guy. But it's hard for me to remember what that's like.
You don't have to rub it in. It's terrible.
No, because I know that's such a normal mode of being, not even just in dates. And I'm thinking like, what's underneath that? Is it just a pattern? Or I think, for a lot of ladies, including myself, there's different things that you would do to determine if this person is safe. And I think one aspect of that does have to do with social norms. And then another one, I think it's sometimes when the conversation is more content, then I can tune in more with like, okay, how is my body reacting to this like neutral content? I don't know if other people are doing that.
Is it kind of like, I'm thinking of actors talking about they'll memorize their script and then it just comes out naturally, so they don't have to think about the words, but then they can focus more on other nonverbal aspects.
Interesting. I think it is like that, and that was not how I learned to act, because I think there's a lot of pitfalls to doing it that way,
Mm.
possible pitfalls.
Like you'll become like wooden or something, or non-dynamic.
Like, you don't see how what you're saying is coming from how you are.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They're still like two separate things. Yeah, I think ideally you get into this space where I said the last line and like the next line, it's not because I memorized it, but just because like I am that like character and like I've done the work and it just makes sense that this is the next thing that they would say. And maybe they're like having these different thoughts and like this is what they choose to say, but it's just so much more rich than
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying this line because like it's the next line.
Right, right. You're talking about inhabiting the character so fully that like the character is speaking rather than the script or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. It's funny because it's kind of like inverse in a way of what I guess I guess I'm realizing the entire conversation has like an undertone or implicit assumption that we're talking about feeling negative feelings, but it could be like, what about inhabiting really positive feelings and then letting that flow and express and it was the whole
Yeah.
opposite side of the spectrum.
Negativity bias.
I mean, that's kind of why people go to self-development and coaching. But it's making me think about, like, I guess there is a thing around allowing yourself to feel positive feelings fully and then, like, surrendering to that in a non-clingy, non-attached way, but in a fully embracing way.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest struggle that I can have with positive emotions, and it's getting a lot better over time. But I will feel like even yesterday we had this session, or you know, even this weekend we had this amazing flow, and it was just so magical, and I was feeling very free. Other people were experiencing a lot of freedom, and then someone said something that was a different tone. I got triggered, and you know, even though I can see, oh, like it's not gonna last forever. You're not gonna be like happy forever. You're not gonna feel that forever. There's still a sense of like, why did this person have to ruin it?
Yeah, it's so funny because this is a great example of like we can go down one road, which is like embracing the part that feels that and feeling it fully. And then I'm remembering, as you're sharing that story, I'm remembering the meditation teacher. I remember going to an interview and being like, I was having such a good meditation, and then this thing came up, and I like lost all my momentum, and I just feel stuck now. And I remember he just reframed it completely, and he was just like, you know, when I used to train at the monastery, I would sit at night feeling great, but I would keep sitting until I hit something that was like a big hindrance, and then I'd be like, oh, great, I found something that I can work on tomorrow. Now I can go to sleep. I'm gonna coast on the good momentum as long as possible, and I'm excited when I find the next hindrance because I'm great. I know what to work on next, and I know there's gonna be something for me tomorrow. And so that's like a reframe of the negative thing.
Yes, it's an unrelatable reframe.
Yeah, it might not work for everyone.
Yeah, it's such a big puzzle, like being yourself. Like, what does it actually mean to be yourself and feel your feelings? And like, where's the space for cultivating things that don't seem like who you are now, but might be more aligned with what you care about or how you want to be or what you believe to be true?
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to a lot of like, what are people looking for, and feeling your feelings. I think for a lot of people, I feel like there's a lot of people that look at feelings from like the classic Greek sense of like feelings are like an unruly animal that we should conquer with reason and not really let it be felt. Like a lot of programming and philosophy type people that I come from is like that. But then it leads to all kinds of things that aren't so good. And then people are like, actually, I'm not happy with the life that I'm in. Maybe feeling my feelings is involved.
Yeah. You can only repress for so long, I would say.
Yeah. I worked with a lot of medicine clients where a lot of them basically would be like, I don't remember or know if I've ever felt like what true happiness or love is in my body. And that's why I want to do these medicine journeys. And so get all this material success and like get a lot of fame or good respect or something or power. But then it's like, I feel kind of empty inside and I feel like there's something I'm missing. Like other people talk about like love and joy and peace. And I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about. And so that like existential moment can lead people to be like the willingness to try something different.
I love when that happens.
When people try something different?
Exactly. I think when people have like a come to Jesus moment and they realize how I've been living my life isn't how I want to be living my life. And I want to make changes so that I really do the things that I care about instead of the things that I think I should care about. Like that point where we both had this, where you realize that doing what you're supposed to do doesn't make you happy.
It's really refreshing to meet other like mentors and teachers and people that really embody the possibility of what I want more for in my life and go like, oh, I think I see that's possible, and now I want more of that. And it's often like kind of painful, at least in the beginning, or confusing. And then, but if there's at least one person that can be like, it's real, because that person embodies it at least a little bit, and then I'm willing to take the leap of faith of like, maybe there's something here I can try. Thanks for listening. This podcast was executive produced by Mitra and Kish, was written by Kish and Mitra, and performed by Mitra and Kish. Like, review, and subscribe wherever your podcasts are found.
For more information about Mitra, you can visit his website at peterxpark.com. And for more information about me, you can visit my website at kishandyou.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.